Hi everybody, I'm Andy Shepherd, a transformation specialist since 2009. I've worked with hundreds of people to having better relationships, better income and happier lives. I have helped many people from every walk of life, a multiple Emmy Award winner, up-and-coming actors, models, singers, housewives, solopreneurs, highly successful businessmen and businesswomen and many, many more. Last week I took you through how to get what we want and more of what we already have. I also showed ways we could appreciate more of what we already have, which would instantly multiplies our wealth and happiness. The simplest of mindset shifts produce very powerful results, and that's what I intend to share with you in this series. So in this session, I'm going to share with you how we can have a happier life the way that you want it to be in several easy steps. Today's session is focused on the power of quitting and the power of starting. Mastering these two things, you will start to master your life. So this is about how to quit whatever you want to quit and start whatever you want to start. So let's look at the first part of tonight's teleconference, how to quit whatever you want to quit. So here are typical things that people want to quit. So some people want to quit smoking. Some people want to quit drinking, being overweight, not exercising. These are kind of very, very typical things. But I'm not sure how many people think about the unusual things that we want to quit. For example, some people might want to quit having superficial relationships, going from one person to the next and never being single. Some people want to maybe quit being with people that drag us down. This is obviously something that is pretty important, especially as I'm sure you're aware, you've heard of the fact that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend most of our time with. So this is something that is very, very important to look at. Another thing that we might want to quit would be self-doubt, to self-loathing or procrastination. I'm going to talk about procrastination later and talk about why that's important. So when we look at the things that we typically want to quit, we want to look at, and the things that are not so typical, we need to ask several questions. So one of the questions would be, why do we want to quit any of these items? This is pretty important. And why do we not want to quit them? And what stops us from quitting? So, for example, if we look at smoking, why do we want to quit smoking? Well, that's pretty obvious. It's health problems, it's antisocial. There are 1,000,001 reasons why we should stop smoking. In fact, I often, as an ex-smoker, I think that it's quite ridiculous that I did smoke in the first place. And if there are any smokers that are listening, so please forgive me. I'm just giving my experience about this. But at the time, I associated good things with smoking. I thought that I used to treat it as something, as a social thing. I used to be out in a bar or wherever, and in fact, I used to get quite a bit of pleasure out of it. I said that I used to think that the 3 C's in life are the best things that you could ever have, which are cigarettes, coffee, and chocolate. That combination was something quite delicious to me. But it's interesting how things completely change. So the next step that we should look at is like how long does it take us to make a change? So the answer to that is it takes this long. When you get to the point where you can say, not another day, not another minute, not another second, I will not have this in my life, we can end anything. And that is the most powerful thing that we have in our life. And this ability to make that decision. And from that point, we can quit anything and we can start to do something in its place, which is what it's all about, I think. So I'll go through in a little bit more detail each of these things. But before that, I just want to give you the 8 steps to quitting, okay? So 8 steps to quitting anything. So the first thing is recognizing that something needs to be changed. That's the first part of it. The second is seeing how it is holding us back, slowing us down, or getting in our way. The third would be contemplating how our lives or those around us will benefit from the change. And like I say, I'm going to go through each of these stage by stage and give examples. The fourth will be the commitment to change. The fifth will be seeing that the change is possible, because if we don't see it, we don't believe it, then we're not even going to try, are we? The sixth will be finding how to change. This can possibly involve using another person to help us through that change, or to inspire us, or to coach us, or as I hear Tony Robbins saying often, success leaves clues. So if we follow somebody who's successful in whatever realm of life, whether it's a person who's become a millionaire, or quit smoking, or done anything that we want to achieve, then that is somebody useful to follow. Number 7 will be implementing that change, to actually put it into practice. And the 8th, which is hugely important, would be accountability, because there is, our habits are like elastic, and we have a tendency to rebound back to our previous position at some point. So I'll be talking about accountability in the different stages and where we can get that. So if we go through the 8 stages here, so if we looked at, for example, let's choose another one. Let's choose drinking. So if we've first recognized that this is something that we need to change. So I did this a number of years ago when I was starting to see that this was a path for me to be a speaker, and I was living in Brazil at the time. I was speaking and at various events, and I said, "What is it?" I said to somebody that I knew in Tony Robbins' organization, "What do you think is the most important part of being a coach or transformational specialist?" And she said, "Well, basically walking your talk." And I thought, in the presentations that I'm giving at universities and in businesses, I am talking about the power of the mind. Well, I'm not walking my talk if people can see me in the local bar having a few drinks with my friends, because it just didn't seem to match. And at that point, I recognized that this was something that I needed to change. So seeing how this is holding me back, slowing me down, or getting in my way. Well, Brazilians are quite social. So often they, if you're kind of drinking with somebody, you're not just going there for a couple of pints, as we call them in the UK, and going home again. It could be quite a long, drawn-out thing. So the possibility of having a hangover the next day are great, and obviously that's going to affect how I'm performing. So that is not a good thing either. So contemplating how our lives or those around us will benefit by this change. Well, obviously, if you've got a hangover, or you're not benefiting others, because you you're probably going to be grumpy some of the time. Or if you're a smoker, then basically you're cutting your life down. So that's something that is not beneficial to others, because I've seen the thing that breaks my heart is oftentimes that if a father or a mother is smoking, they will see that their sons and daughters will smoke as well. So you kind of, it's like a death sentence that you're giving as an inheritance to your offspring, which I think is pretty dreadful, because at the end of the day, smoking is going to harm you. And, most people die horribly from it, which is just terrible, really. So the next part is to commit to the change. And like I say, if you can get to this point where you just say, not another day, not another minute, not another second, that's it, I've had enough, this ends now, you get to that passion, then this is great. You need to see that the change is possible. So you need to see other people who have given up smoking, drinking, or if you're overweight, a person who is perhaps 200 or 100 pounds overweight. It might be difficult for that person to see themselves as going on a diet, not eating the food that they love to eat, or that they can actually get fit. So they need to do some research and see other people who've achieved it and see how they've managed to do it, and to kind of imitate them. And that's kind of lucky, really, because we don't need to be pioneers. We don't need to do things on our own. There is so much. I mean, this is the technological age now. It's so easy to find and connect to people and knowledge that we want to, through social media or through e-books or through books or groups or whatever. It's just so easy to connect and find people. I mean, basically, if I want to know anything, I just enter Facebook, and I've got 1,500 people who will, somebody out of those will answer. Yesterday, for example, a friend of mine said, I think there was a tremor. And so I put on Facebook, what's that? Because I couldn't see anything in any of the news and on the news or anywhere, and boom, I got an answer back within seconds. So we can find any of this information very, very quickly of whatever we want to know. We need to see that the change is possible. And, this is something that, like I say, is something very, very important. Finding out how to change and implementing all of that. And finally, we need to implement the change, because there's so many people who turn around and say, I'm going to do it tomorrow, and or at the end of the year, or I really should stop smoking, or I really should not eat that, or I really should start exercising, and you're kind of shoulding all over the place. It's not a case of should. You just change one word from should to must. I must stop smoking, and then put a date to it, put a time, or just do what I did with smoking. I just stopped doing it. And for me, I got leverage. I got this strong commitment to change, this leverage that made it happen, which was basically I was living in the UK, about to go back to Brazil again, and there was a very beautiful Brazilian woman that I had the opportunity to date. Now, she didn't know that I smoked. So that was one thing. And the second was, in the UK, we have a pretty cold climate. So oftentimes there are colds and viruses and all sorts of things that are making us ill. And I got this really bad kind of like chest complaint. And there was something in my intuition which was like saying, if you keep smoking, you're going to end up with a major chest infection. And this frightened the life out of me. So that gave me the leverage to stop. And knowing that this woman that I really cared for was also going to not date me. That was the leverage that I need. So that gave me this commitment to change. And then, I just finally did it. I'd done it 60 times, but that commitment to change was strong enough to keep me to today, where I've not smoked since the year 2000. So that's 14 years now. And the accountability was basically because, the lady that I was talking about, she would just not let me do it. So there are other forms of accountability. So accountability can be from a coach. For example, you can get somebody to act as your accountability coach. Another form of accountability can be from Facebook. I'm doing exercise series now called T25, and every day I put down the day and what I did, and other people who are doing the same exercise routine, they're coming in and they're saying, great, well done, or they're liking it. So this gives me accountability. And if I missed at the beginning, I wasn't doing my routine correctly, I just wasn't able to do it. I had major problems following the routine. The first day, I didn't realize there was a kind of a modifier who was doing an easier version of it. So I was doing the full-blown one, and it nearly killed me. I just tried keeping up and couldn't do it. And I was actually sore for the next week, and I contemplated giving up. Fortunately, there were other people there to coach and help me through it, and I went back in again eventually after doing it all wrong for about 2 weeks. And so, to cut a long story short, I decided to just start the whole program again, and now I've stuck to it, mainly because I've kept to those 8 things. So if we put these on all of these, then basically we'll get to the results that we want to, and that's pretty important. So it's very important to go through this process and ask yourself these questions, to go through the 8 steps, and to really think about why we want to quit and what will be the benefits. And we've got to stir up some emotion here, because some of the things that we want to quit doing are pleasurable. So, a lot of people really enjoy drinking, who really enjoy smoking, enjoy eating. It's something pleasurable to do. And so these are things that are pretty difficult to let go of. So we just need a very strong reason for doing that. So by asking the right questions, we're going to get there. So let's look at the second part then. So how do we start whatever we want to start? So first we need to look at why should we start something new? Why would we want to do that? And there are lots of it may seem fairly simple depending on what it is that we're going to start, but it's something that we really need to look at. We need to look at what is stopping us as well, and how can we stop the stopping? How can we stop being stopped? The biggest thing that often stops us is, the biggest things are, the first is that we believe that we just can't do something. So maybe we're thinking of going and doing a university degree or something like this, and we just get overwhelmed by it. So we need to do a little bit of research, like I say, and look at people who are the same. If we're 16 or 17, to go and look at people who have actually achieved it, who are at the same kind of intellectual level, if you like, as us, and how they actually managed to do it, and try and talk to them. And the other biggest thing is that stops us is procrastination. So I think the greatest thing that I ever heard I love what Tony Robbins said, which was that if the cure to procrastination is to procrastinate tomorrow. I thought that was pretty useful. And please excuse me for mentioning his name now and again, but he is somebody that I have been studying in great detail and has spent considerable money invested in his program, so that's why that is. So why else do we procrastinate? Well, could it be laziness that stops us? Well, maybe it is in some cases, but I think there's something a little bit deeper than that. It's not just that we're lazy, because I've seen people who, I had a client who was not lazy at all, not in any way, shape or form. He was a person who really committed his life to working hard on getting the best out of his body and getting into shape. But there were certain things that he just couldn't do for his business. He was just procrastinate like anything. And so in his case, it wasn't down to laziness. It was, it took a while for us to work through a process for him to be able to really see what it was. I mean, I could see it, but he needed to realize it himself, and then he could move forward. The biggest drivers, the two things that drive us in life are principally pain and pleasure. I'm sure some of you may have heard this before. So we either do everything that we can to avoid pain, and we do everything that we can to receive pleasure. And I'm not going to get into the fact that there are certain people who enjoy pain and they find that pleasurable. Let's just forget that for now, shall we, please? So this passion for following pain, removing pain from our life and following pleasure is something that really can cause us quite a few problems and stop us from going forward. For example, an entrepreneur is somebody who is probably going to go through a person who's self-employed is probably going to go through a lot of painful processes, because life is pretty unsure. You don't know sometimes where your next paycheck's going to come from. If you have a regular job, yes, I know that nowadays you don't have the security that you did in the past, where you could say, right, I have job security and I have my benefits and I have a job for life. That doesn't seem to be the trend anymore. But when you're self-employed or you have your own business, then you really have to go through a lot of pain barriers, as you just don't know whether what you're going to try to do is going to be successful or not. You have to be pretty fearless and just go through that pain and get there. And you get your rewards from it. You get your pleasure from when things boom, and there are lots of successful entrepreneurs who are reaping great rewards and getting a lot of money, which is fabulous. And so they're negating the pain and seeing the pleasure they're getting from things. So if we're looking at procrastination, for example, specifically, we usually associate a lot of pain or discomfort with doing whatever it is that we're procrastinating to stop doing. So we need to look at this to our advantage. So find out how can we stop procrastinating. So one thing that we need to know about is and that can be useful to us, is knowing about something called anchoring. Let me explain this. Last time I explained a little bit about the fact that we are conditioned and what conditioning was and so on. And conditioning is the basis of all neuro-linguistic programming, and Tony Robbins uses this to great extent by taking it further and what he calls neural associative conditioning. I'm not going to, these are just technical terms. You don't need to know all of that, but this is just some of the things that I've learned along the way and part of my profession. So conditioning is something that started off with what Pavlov proved with some of his early experiments with dogs. One that I'm sure you've all heard of is the one where Pavlov is busy showing dogs food and they're salivating. So he does this several times, and he actually measures how much saliva they produce. Then later, at the point of showing the dogs, the dogs who are actually starving, showing them the meat, he would ring the bell at the same time. He could get to the point where he didn't show them the meat, he would just ring the bell, and they would salivate to the same amount, which to him, what he'd done was he conditioned them to associate the bell with getting food, and so they would salivate. Now, through his experiments, he proved that animals are were conditionable, and he then concluded that we are as well. Now, it seems that this conditioning is perhaps a part of our learning process and is quite good because we learn things and they become conditioned in us. The unfortunate thing is there are lots of things that are conditioned in us which are not useful to us. I'll give you and then they become anchored to us. So a very good example of anchoring, or I'll give you a couple actually. One of them is with music, for example. A typical one is when we're in love. We often have a piece of music which, when we play it, then it will remind us of the person that we love, and we'll feel something very pleasant, very good with that. Equally, if we're not with that person anymore, then the music then has gives a new anchor, and the anchor now gives us pain because we hear the music and we're now associating something painful because of the loss of the person. It reminds us of the person we're not with anymore. Anchoring is used extensively in advertising, for example. So with Beyonce in, I hope this is right, I think it's the Pepsi adverts. So what happens is people associate great pleasure from hearing her music. So when we hear her music, we get a state change and we feel good. So what Pepsi do is they show her image, her music, and then they show Pepsi. And then they show her image, her music, and then they show Pepsi again. So this is anchoring. This is associating this pleasure with the Pepsi. And this is what's called anchoring. So how can we use that to our favor? Well, there is actually a technique that I've learned which is called collapsing anchors. So what we can do is we can have an anchor which is a negative trigger, and then we learn to collapse it. An example that I gave last week was of a baby that kept falling onto a green carpet and became conditioned to associate pain with the color green. So this was a negative anchor. And so these are things that are good which need to be collapsed. And so we do these by creating positive anchors, if you like, and then by doing a technique of joining the bad anchor to the good anchor, it collapses because positive and negative kind of cancel each other out. So that's just something that I help my clients with, which is pretty good. So we need to see the benefit from being able to quit anything that we want to quit. Okay? So we need to ask the question, can you see the benefit of being able to quit anything you want to quit? And can you see the benefit of being able to start anything that you want to start? We need to look at what that would mean to us and how life would be. How would we benefit? And we need to look at and think about how we deserve this. Well, what I want to do is I just want to make an offer to everybody who's listening and make the possibility to make any change that you want one step closer. I will give anybody who's listening to this call a breakthrough session completely free. Okay, so I'm going to give away 10 of these. So please contact me as quickly as possible, as these positions will be filled pretty quickly. So if you send me a message via Facebook, you can find me on facebook.com. Probably the easiest one is if you go /BrazilAndy, BrazilAndy, or you can email me at andy@shepherdcoaching.com. So that's ANDY@SHEPHERD coaching, one word, .com. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Next week, I will be talking about how to find what you want to do with your life and how to find your life purpose. Basically, this is something that I did, and it just completely changed and transformed my life. And this is the main reason why I'm in America now, because knowing your life purpose, it just makes everything easier. A lot of us just have jobs, or we just do things because we think, well, I need to earn some money. But when you do something with passion, then it's a complete life changer. So that's what I want to share with you next week. So again, thank you for everybody who's listening on the call. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. So bye for now.